Okay, first thing, you're going to want to make a card. I suggest using a plane, orienting it. It doesn't really matter. I'm just making them all look the same. Scale won't matter either. You can fix it later. Extrude it a little, and then I give it a little bit of depth using Control R so that I can bend the card so there's enough geometry to bend. And then the last bit is just give a little bevel around the corners. Make sure all the corners are consistent, obviously. I'm going to stop it too, just for sake of time, but make them all consistent. So looking at the cards that are already made, the big thing to focus on here is making a separate UV map for the front and the back. You have all the vertices in 3D space in the XYZ or the viewport plane, and you have the same vertices mapped onto a UV, and as you move in one, it doesn't move in the other. But the reason to have two separate UV maps is so that you can entirely project an image onto either side of the face. I think a card is a really simple and illustrative way to show this. And what's nice is you can modify them or share these attributes. And the back is consistent. And I made a different material for each of the cards, one of which, as you saw, was flipped upside down, but you can reuse in a node group down at the bottom and just reuse the back. So check out my sister video to this, actually showing how this deck of cards is made. But in essence, I only need 4 cards so that I can change the shape keys and then keyframe the shape keys, and that will modify the behavior of the whole deck. And this modifier I've also made, it allows you to change the number density of how many cards. So when I want the deck to look full, it looks full. When I need it to look sparse, I can make it look sparse. So especially for beginners like myself, I find using reference to be, end all be all in terms of use. Once you have your materials, the things you will be animating, actually before I even made anything, I recorded a video of the actual shuffle that I intended to replicate. Shout out to my brother for being better at shuffling. He's earned that. However, another note I should probably highlight for especially beginners like myself: don't do yourself the disservice of putting the camera off an axis. You can normalize a lot of rotations if you just put the camera somewhere that makes a lot more sense than just floating in space. And how I have my layout set up is I always make sure that I see what is being rendered at the end. And if you can give yourself that extra boost in not needing to figure out rotations by just simplifying your camera, you will be able to do this a lot faster. I think the hardest bit of all of this was me trying to align bone rotations against the camera that is just facing some which way that it didn't need to. It could have been flat. It could have been on the y-axis. Everything could have been simple. Learn from me. So now to actually talk about the rig and the animation. A deck of cards being shuffled is one entity being split into 2. So to do this, I really just put one parent bone that the bottom half of the deck is entirely aligned with, and then the top half of the deck is aligned with a child bone. I actually think I have the parenting turned off, and a toggleable copy transforms bone constraint that I leave on as long as the full deck, and then I turn off so that I can rotate and manipulate half of it separately. And then as it comes back together, I try to align these bones together, and again, had the camera been a little better placed to begin with, this rotation wouldn't have been so much of a nightmare. Now to speak a little bit on kind of the VFX that were added and why they were added, I'll start with the grease pencil. And again, the geonodes that make these into a deck are covered in a partner video. But the essence is each half of this deck is entirely one card. So in addition to make it feel like the cards are moving, but also to obfuscate the fact that every one of those faces is the same, I added a little bit of like super choppy grease pencil to make it look like it's animating. The other half of the VFX is actually also included in that partner video. It's another geometry node setup that I'll go into way more detail later. But essentially, I can put all these little effects across an arc, and I think they give a lot of impact and gravity to like where these cards are placed, even though in the end I ended up not actually putting a table in my or anything but like a background. So these give a real sense of like space, and in tandem with like the audio cues of the cards hitting the table. I think the visuals really sell the fact that, like, okay, this is what's happening instead of a random motion. So VFX, I think, are super interesting and fun. So I made some tools, and I'll share those with you. If you want to learn more, feel free. So now on to the back half of the animation. I did all the animating in one Blender file. Some of this you'll notice on the far right, their visibility for the render are keyframed. So that card at the very front is just me there so that I can make sure that these curves line up. And then speaking to these curves, the cards are actually following the same curve as the water. They are again using that GeoNode setup where it's got an ability to flatten in camera space. So I like to animate in 3D, but I like to be able to force the Z ordering so that I can ensure that what I want to be seen on top is being seen on top. So that's all that this is. I just didn't want the cards fighting with the ink. I think it could have been cool to see more of the ink, maybe, but I also wanted it to, like, the cards to read more fully. So I just put them on top using that same VFX emitter node that you can see in another video in more detail. And then finally, I might slow down a little and show, oh yeah, how the curves are moving. It's one node in the curve editor. It's just the trim curve, and I have a stepped interpolation modifier in the graph editor because I find that's a little easier. I'll just keyframe where I want the start and end to start and end moving, funnily. But then I like to actually modify it with the graph editor because otherwise, how are you going to visually see and modify things in time? I would suggest using that over trying to, like, eyeball keyframe values on that. Finally, the last thing is the actual, like, showing of the cards of the deal. Essentially, the cards come to the front. I turn some things off. You can't see them. And then everything follows the same rotation and presentation. It's a copied graph editor basically across the three cards, and one of them's rotated to be upside down. So originally I recorded it all out 3 times, but once I added the music in, I found that I needed only twice so that it would fit alongside the music. And when you're putting things together in this editing situation, you can also retime certain parts of the animation. As I'm showing the cards, it was way too fast and you couldn't see the faces. So I just slowed that down so that it reads more clearly. My friend wrote a graphic novel and made a tarot deck. And if you want to support more of what she's doing, there's a website in the description, the Rain Sound Publishing House. She's collaborated with some other people and has her own things up there, and you should check it out. If you want to see more of what I'm up to, this is probably the best place. Got some more videos, different animations, different how they were made. Attempt to be a little more streamlined, just show the final process all in one video, and then a single shoot off for those that are really in the need for the specific of a very technical video where this is mainly animation. Yeah, hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.